Welcome to Attuned for Wholeness with me, Lisa Pinney. Life is full of uncertainty, confusion, and heartache. It gets hard to manage at times. This show will combine your lived experience with self-awareness and prayer to help you navigate through those tough times. You know, those ones that keep you from living in a place of true harmony, fully attuned to your body, your soul, and your spirit. Attunement is a spiritual practice of getting emotionally honest and connecting with God so we can recover from daily life and our souls can go back to a place of rest. Together, we'll move away from the unhealthy ways of coping that temporarily alleviate the pressure, but ultimately leave us feeling more disconnected from our true selves. Attuned for Wholeness with me, Lisa Pinney, starts now. Hi, everyone. We're back again, and today we have Scott Moore with us. Scott is my neighbor, but he's also a senior neurophysiologist. He has 17 years of experience, and he does a lot of mapping brain systems for OR procedures. Is that a fair way to say it?
That's pretty good. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay. So Scott and I are neighbors. And we've gone to the same church together for a number of years. But so on a personal level, I know that Scott's family has gone through a lot. So with his expertise in understanding the brain and his personal experience, I thought he might have a lot to say to us today. So let me start by telling you what has happened in maybe the last 8 years. His house burnt down, and it took forever to get fixed, restored, and all of that. And when it burnt down, he was in Colorado. He wasn't
Utah.
even home. Utah.
Yep.
Okay. So he wasn't even home, and he couldn't get back home, and his wife had to get through a lot of it herself. They lost their cat. A few years later, there were some job changes. And then after that, he recently lost his father. So that's a whole lot of trauma. And he's been a trooper, but it does something to us, right?
Sure.
So I'd like to ask you, how do you feel about everything you've been through? Like, do you just keep powering through? Have you had to stop and reflect, do some therapy? What have you done because of everything you've been through?
Lisa, thank you for having me on the program, and thank you for the introduction. Yes, so this was about 2007. Actually, ironically, we're about 2 days away from the anniversary when this happened. It happened on a Friday, April 7th. And here we are, April 5th. So again, it's going to fall on a Friday, and it's going to be the anniversary from 2017 till 2023 here, which is about 6 years, and a 6-year anniversary. It's been it's crazy to think how much time has passed and how much life has happened during that time. And I have to say, so at the time this fire happened, we didn't have anything in our lives like your program, your work, your ministry, your business, your podcast. None of that was around yet. Again, I was working in Utah as a state manager for a neurophysiology company. I am a senior neurophysiologist, which means I provide intraoperative, surgical mapping and monitoring of the nervous system. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So again, I don't come with any of those credentials. I don't want to confuse anyone here. But again, I've had life experiences when relating to trauma, and and everyone has had some trauma in their life. And with me, I was, like I said, I was working in Utah that Friday, and got a call from my neighbor when I had just come out of the gym Friday afternoon. And again, it was just like, I think your house is on fire. I see smoke coming out of your kitchen. And I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe Maurice is home cooking or something like that. And then I got a second call. She goes, no, I think your house is on fire. And at that time, I couldn't get a hold of my wife, and which made things that much. And so basically, I'm sitting in Utah, 2 time zones away from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where, we had a house at the time, and we were working a crazy kind of like life, where, she's working, in healthcare, I'm working in healthcare, and we're taking this big step to try to, build up some professional growth for ourselves. And it took me out to Utah for big chunks of time. And while I was out there, obviously this happened, and you feel helpless, right? I mean, you can't, like, everything you're working for, you find out, well, all the sacrifices you made being away from home and family, it's now gone. I mean, I lost, you had mentioned a cat. I lost actually two cats and a dog. All of our pets perished in the fire. And and the house was, the frame was not a loss. We were able to rebuild, but pretty much every
It
room in
was
the house
charred on
was,
the inside, though,
yeah,
for sure.
roof was busted open. Basically, everything was essentially destroyed. Virtually all of our possessions. We were able to restore a couple things, and virtually all of our clothing, etc. So yeah, you're basically down to having two cars and the frame of a house that you can, that is essentially condemned, and it was tough. And I flew home the next day. I was able to get a flight back right away, and at least bury my pets. But you had asked me, I don't want to get too far off topic, but you had asked me, like, how did I deal with it? How did I get through with it? I mean, and I do remember that, having feeling two things. I mean, again, being out in Utah and kind of like doing this sort of like travel back and forth, and it was a lot. And and actually one of the first things I felt, ironically, was I felt almost like a sense of relief. Like, you know what, I've been working so hard trying to make this all work and get this all done. And like, now I can just quit because everything's gone. I'm like,
Mhm.
I can just quit and go home, and we can just start over from scratch. And you had that sense of defeat. There was almost a relief, like, you know what, it's okay. You lost. It's over. Didn't turn out to be the case, but at that moment, that's just kind of what you're thinking. And I did fall
I can understand that. You're working really hard on something and you're,
to build a life, and
oh man. And then you're like,
and it's
okay,
gone.
I get a
It's like,
break, but did I want it this way?
oh man. And
Now I remember then I think it was the next night. I don't know that you were home yet or if you left. But I had Dawn Maurice over for dinner and
mhm,
she could barely put two words together.
yes.
Whew,
Hmm.
I felt that. I felt that for both of you.
Hmm. Yeah. I remember being in Utah that night, and just falling to the ground and literally thanking God, saying thank you for, the thought of Job. I mean, you hate to
Yeah.
compare yourself to biblical figures, but you thought of Job. It's like you give and you take away. You just took a lot away, and but you give and you take away, and that was
Mhm.
my thoughts. And so when we regrouped, we're in this unique situation where, I come home, and like you said, she could barely put two words together. Ironically, she wasn't home at the time because she had
That's right.
taken
She was at a movie.
she had taken some friends and family, my parents in particular, to go see Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. Ironically. And so she was there watching that movie, and I couldn't get a hold of her, of course, because she was in the movie theater. But so it took some time to sort everything out. But anyways, so when we came home, um, we had church. Like, we had, and we Lisa, I go to, you also go to just an amazing living church filled with some amazing people that just immediately were there to brace us and support us. We had family as well in the area that helped us, but there were a lot of people in that church that just sat down and talked to us and worked with us, and were there, not with, like, prayed for us, provided for us in so many ways. Network of Hope, we're still thankful for Network of Hope and the people associated with them that kind of helped us restock our house after all the work was done a little over half a year later. And but yeah, we had that, and Damaris had,
Wait, I think it's noteworthy. It took
yes.
a year and a half.
So I'm sorry, but a little over half a year. I apologize.
Oh,
The fire was in April. We didn't move in until basically the week of Christmas. So
mhm.
it was about a little over half a year there. So
It's still a long time to
it
not.
was a long time.
You
We
were
were kind of living on the road.
displaced.
We were living on the road. I mean, like, someone put us up for a while. Our insurance company found somewhere for us to live. We had to move around quite a bit. So I think Don Maurice wound up living in 4 different locations, and I would go from there back to Utah. So that was the other issue. I mean, we still had to kind of move forward. I mean, we needed revenue, money.
Mm-hmm.
So we were stuck, and a lot of crazy things happened during that time. So just a little side story. So, um, we basically got a big chunk of money. We were like looking at like how much money we had in the bank at that time, a couple nights later, and just like we thought we had a miracle because there was all this extra money in there. We're thinking, well, and then the insurance couldn't have worked that fast, to provide us with anything. Like, where did all this money come from? And so then my company had to get in touch with me. We're like this is a miracle, like because we needed a certain amount of money to cover. That was around tax time too, if you remember, like April.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had worked as a contractor the year before I started with that company I was with, and so we owed a lot of in taxes too. I had gotten the tax bill pretty much like 2 days after the fire. So basically, the guy who does my taxes like, yeah, so you're gonna owe about $4,000. Like, I don't own a shirt right now. So I had I had nothing. I had literally nothing. And we had, so I'm like, I got to keep working. So obviously I had to keep going back to Utah. Anyways, so we owed all that money in taxes. And all of a sudden we look at the bank account, all this money's there. We're like, my God has provided for us. This is a miracle. And the next day, my company got in touch with me, said, so we made a mistake and we paid you twice. Would you be able to give that money back to us? So we're like, I said yes. I'm sorry I didn't notice that earlier, but we had a house fire, and just a lot of insurance was moving around. So they're like, oh my God, we didn't know. We're sorry, but I did. I gave back all the money.
That's
integrity. Hard thing to do. Hard thing to do. Like, all right, I'll write you guys a check or whatever you want, give you back the money. And that was the only time that ever happened in my life where like, a company just paid me twice by accident or whatever on payroll. And this is a large company I was working for at the time too. So it's just was a random thing, and it just happened at that moment. We're like, it was a little heartbreaking, but but anyway, so during that time, again, I was in Utah. Dawn Maurice had, she did start talking to she goes, should I talk to a therapist at church or should I talk to someone like outside the church? And I said, why don't you do both? Why don't you do both? It's okay to talk to somebody. Definitely talk to people in church. Definitely have those connections, reach out, but definitely, hire someone, pay someone, go sit down and talk with someone professional. Like, I mean, Lisa, you know the value of that. I mean, the work that you do, I mean, you know the value that's those moments you really need to have your network in place and people to talk to, connect with, and just like, vent to at least, And,
at least.
Yes, and you
were on their shoulder.
And she would have been there with you. I mean, you were there already. You were there for us. I mean, but you weren't professionally doing anything professionally at that time. So I think this is still before any of that kicked off. Yeah. So, but otherwise we definitely would have been with you. But no, but she talked to you. She talked to people in the church. She had people like that to go with. But so here's the thing that I think is worth noting is, from my perspective, is I didn't. I made that mistake. I went back to Utah. Utah's unique. I mean, my life was work in Utah, work. And I went hiking. Utah's beautiful state, beautiful outdoors. I hiked a lot. That was therapy to me to some regard. I went to church. I had a good church out there to attend. And that was obviously a big help for me as well. But I didn't really have anyone out there that I could like talk to, if that makes sense, like no one to connect with. Therapeutically talk to, and that was a mistake of mine that I didn't reach out more. And I think that hurt me because, you talk about these traumas, these like, everyone has their own versions of what a trauma is, and a fire and loss of pets, loss of a child, traumas can have different flavors, as you well know. I mean, what one person might bounce back from quickly, everyone's wired differently. So something that I might bounce back from quickly, my wife might really be hurt by and take a lot longer to process. And that's okay, because everyone's different and no one can tell you
that's right
it is or isn't, like no
right.
one has,
and some people are just more resilient.
Well, it's true in certain categories, and in other categories
I'm not that person. I don't think. The older I get, I'm not that person.
And I thought I was with the fire. I thought, hey, all right, put my head down. My life is going to be rebuilding, focus on rebuilding, supporting Dawn Maurice, work for, to carry on my professional career and advance that. But in the meantime, I wasn't doing anything for myself, quote unquote. So, what happened was, and when this really started to kick in and I realized that this is a problem is, finally, ultimately, I got a promotion to come back to Pittsburgh, and just be working for Pittsburgh full time. And the house was, pretty much done. And But meanwhile, they had tried to restore as many of our household goods as they possibly could. And they had them all boxed up and they dropped them off in our basement. So I went downstairs and, I was trying to unbox each box. Each box I opened up, so if you've experienced a house fire, there's a very unique smell. It's almost like a burnt coffee smell is the best way I can describe it. Haunted me, and every time I walked into the house and walked back out again, you'd have to change your clothes and shower because you smelt that. It was like being too close to a campfire, but worse because so much had burned in that house. Electronics, furniture.
Yeah.
So many combustibles, right? So
And that smell is enough to be like send you right through the roof.
It's a trigger. And I didn't think it was at first, but we, like a couple months into this process, someone invited us over to campfires to hang out and have food, and we had gone, and that turned into a little bit like the fire didn't, but the smell later when I came home, I could smell my clothes and hair, and I'm like, it was a trigger. So when I'm unboxing all these boxes, like, okay, this company that's trying to restore your what belongings they could that were salvageable, you'd open the box and the first thing you hit was that smell. Because it's just, it's just there. And some items were just charred and burnt and just they couldn't perfectly restore it. They did their absolute best, and all credit to them. But you just open up and it's like, you remember what your life again. I've been away from home for a long time, probably the longest stretch I'd ever been away from home between the time I left and the time the fire happened. So pretty much I have a snapshot of what my life, what life was like back at home. And then all this happened and I came back and everything was destroyed. And it's like, there was no transition for me, so to speak. So you open each box and it's a memory. It's like, oh, I remember this. It was sitting over here. It was in my office or whatever. And here's the smell of a fire. And must have been like 60 boxes or something crazy like that. And each one I'm unboxing, each one I'm opening, each one I'm unwrapping. And it's like, here's a memory and here's a smell to remind you of here's a trigger. And it happened over and over again. And it was really beating me down and hurting me. I was realizing that, like, oh my God, I'm still like, I haven't fully processed this yet. I mean, I put my head down and I got through the time and did what we had to do to get back to life again. But, it's like, those triggers were still there, and I made the mistake of not talking to someone, on a more professional level and getting, getting that kind of help, so to speak. And Dom Reese did.
And there's some things about that, like who are you going to go to? You're going to go through your insurance, and okay, fine. And then some people prefer a Christian counselor. Some people prefer a skilled counselor. And then there's always the wait list. It's not like, oh, I'm going to make a phone call and I'm going to schedule an appointment. It's a little bit of a process.
Sure.
So there's delay after delay after delay. I mean, you weren't home and then you had to keep working and all those things added up until you had to unbox everything and you're like, yeah, now I got to do something.
Yeah. And I think that's when it really started hitting me and really started bringing me down and just kind of like triggering these trauma memories or however you want to put that. It just essentially is like, well, oh my God, it's like everything's big flashback. Here's your life before, here's the smell of your life burning. And
yeah.
And it's like, and so that was a very difficult time for me. And at that, again, at that point, Dom Reese had like a better healing period in talking to people. And I didn't. I just kind of like went submerged and reemerged. And it was a different experience for both of us. And so we processed it all differently. And not to say that she got over it easily or anything. Obviously, it was just as traumatic for her as it was for me. But it was definitely. So I mean, having said that, you can see the value of reaching out to people, having a network. You don't have to talk to everybody but you have to talk to somebody, and you have to make those connections. And I think that you almost want a turtle, just kind of like walk down in times like that, but really what you have to do is reach out, so.
Yeah, because it's like everything around you is so overwhelming. You have to minimize that in some way so that you can function. And if you can't minimize it, it's just too much.
Yes.
And so then you want to back off instead of reach out, right?
Right.
We self-protect, we isolate, um, and we shut down.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's all and during times like that, it's all you can do to go to work and come home.
Yes. Mhm.
So, okay, now we're like 5 years later.
Mhm.
No. Oh, yeah, about
Well,
5 years now.
but yeah, roughly it's this will be like, I think, the 6-year anniversary Friday.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And how do you feel like you so did first let me ask you, did you ever talk to anybody? And did you understand what was going on in your brain?
No, I don't think it did. I don't think I really understood, like, how this was affecting me, I should say. Like I said, it really wasn't until 7, 8 months later when you're just starting to like rebuild your, reset up your house, so to speak, that like those memories started hitting me. But otherwise, I mean, no, I just kind of had my head down, and eventually, you did start talking to some people after that. After that point, I did start talking to some people, and like getting, just started getting take a more therapeutic approach. Like, okay, you're hurt. You're hurt. You need to heal. I think in I come from a healthcare background, and I can tell you we are quickly coming up to speed with realizing that your head is and your emotions are need to be treated like as if you had broken your leg or you had a heart condition or diabetes.
That's a really good point.
You need to treat it. You need to treat it. You can have chronic conditions with it, um, but
Mhm.
you need to do the therapy, and and you need to eliminate that stigma. And I think it's also a big problem is like there's that stigma that you know I'm hurting, but I can't really tell. How are you? I'm okay. I'm fine. Like I don't know how many people are okay and fine, but probably not nearly as many as tell me they are okay and fine.
Well, that's our go-to,
Yes, yeah.
and it's
It's a
not
social
necessarily
mechanism, right?
honest. Sometimes it's honest, but
Yeah,
not all the time. But then,
right.
I think the role of faith, it plays a really big role in dealing with trauma. It offers hope. It's
Yes.
not therapeutic, but it offers hope. And when people are in a hospital because they're sick, they heal better through with prayer as
Mhm.
a component of their healing. Same is true for trauma.
Yes.
When there's an offering of prayer along with the support, it just makes it a little bit easier.
Lisa, that's a really good point. I think about that. So, they asked Jesus, they said, well, why are you eating with these sinners? Why are you eating sinners? He says, what did he say? He said, hey, the people that are well don't need a doctor. The people that are sick and
Mhm.
injured, they need a doctor. So essentially, what is a church and what is a church community? It's like a hospital for your heart and your head. I mean, in a lot of, you need to talk to people like professional psychologists and therapists, but you also need that
Oh,
kind of
wait, and a good coach?
and a good coach, absolutely, right here. Yep. Yep. And you need people like Lisa, and you need good people, a good church community around you. That was the one thing that was, I mean, it sounds cliche, but that was one thing that got us through was faith. God's is not going to just end the story here. We were living for Christ. I mean, I'm a believer, and I'm like, I know that, a lot of things we were doing during that time. Actually, so ironically, my wife and I, so the fire was in April, and in July, we really struggled with this, but we were gonna lead a mission trip in July.
I remember that.
Out in Utah. So, but and like we were like, I don't know that this is the right. We did it anyways. Like we're just like, let's go with it. Just like and I'm glad we did. I'm glad we did. A lot of good came out of that. But having said that, like it was rather than turtling like kind of locking down, it was reaching out, going and making connections, and like I said, faith carried us through. I mean, God did not let us down. Things were rebuilt. Things were restored. I mean, we don't have the same things we had before, but we have everything we need. We have the income that we needed. We have the professional growth we needed. We have wonderful pets. We have a wonderful child now, and
Yeah,
all these
you
things
do.
fell into place at the right time, and our life was restored. And I don't want to say it was better than before because it's almost like an insult to having great pets and everything else, but God took care of us. God led us through that. And to anyone that is going through those moments where you have that fire in your life, whatever that is, there's something on the other side of that. It's
Mhm.
not the end. It is not the end. Don't let it be the end. I mean, don't choose to make that the end. Take the next step and see what's behind the next door, because it's going to be better than where you are now. And I confess to that, and I thank God for it.
I think that there's another part that we can add to that. So I always say that only God can heal soul wounds, and trauma is a soul wound. And so it messes with your beliefs and your trust level and the way you engage the world. And so when we let God come to those really raw parts of our heart and speak to us and minister to us on that really personal, deep level, I think that it does something to bring healing to the forefront, healing a little faster. At least that's my experience. And so that's what you're saying, is that all these things really contributed to your health and well-being and recovery. But I'm
Absolutely.
going to have you back and we talk about the brain. You never even got around.
Yeah, we can. More than happy to come back on the program. Absolutely.
So we have about 1 minute left. I'd like you to be able to tell all the viewers, how can they reach you?
I host my own podcast. It's a small professional podcast called IONM for Life, Adventures in Neuromonitoring. You can reach me at Scott at IONM, the number 4 life.com. And we talk about stories of people doing really cool things in healthcare, and hence the term Adventures in Neuromonitoring. So if you want to find out more about what I do and all the cool, wonderful people that are doing great things in healthcare, you can come listen to some of our stories. And that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. And Lisa,
All right,
I'm so thankful for everything that you do, and we really appreciate you from a personal and professional standpoint.
thank you. I'm so glad I know you, that you're my friend. I just appreciate everything about you and Dawn Maurice. So with this last little minute, I'm just going to say, hey, I want to remind you guys that the app that I've been working on, it looks like we're going to call it Get Attuned, not just Attuned. It's a trademarking thing. And it should be out by the end of the month. I'm super excited about it. So if you don't want to have a coach guiding you towards places of healing, you can get the app and have a self-guided approach to manage your stress, to manage negative emotions. And in some cases, some people know how to navigate this so well that it's really good for trauma. But it's really more designed for daily stress and negative events. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and you'll see me again in 2 more weeks with another guest. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Scott.
Thank
Really
you. You're welcome.
appreciate you doing this, and we'll talk about coming back so that you can actually talk about the stuff you know about.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Attuned for Wholeness. I hope you got the tune-up you needed today. Keep tuning in on the first and third Wednesday of every month at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time and 3:30 Central Time on ttm.com for more conversations around caring for our emotional health and spiritual well-being. I'd like to invite you to consider becoming a resiliency coach to develop the skills that will help others heal and bounce back quicker from negative events. Or maybe you're someone who's looking for a holistic and spiritual path to move through anxiety and unresolved trauma. For both of these resources, visit my website at www.wholenessandpractice.com. And thank you for listening to Attuned for Wholeness on Transformation Talk Radio.